Hey guys, I've got fellow member of Team Grind Nation, Doug Polk here.
How's it going, everyone? Glad to be here to check out some spin goes, and let's see how these guys went down.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Doug. I'm really excited. As excited as we can be, right? Reviewing, doing work, reviewing, trying to learn some poker.
This is about as exciting as a 27-cent spin go.
That's what I was thinking. So yeah, we spent a minimum spin here, which is always disappointing. But it's interesting when you play these 25-cent spins because, generally speaking, players don't really like playing the minimum spins, especially at the low stakes.
Yeah, I could definitely see how in spin goes people just try and get through these and move on to the next one, right?
Yeah, you definitely get a lot of players that are just going all in pre-flop, so some of the spins are really, really short, as you can imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
By the way, I wouldn't have mind raising pre-flop with this hand.
Okay.
I mean, checking is obviously fine, but it's also one of those hands where if you do raise, first off, I think he's going to be raising a lot of his good hands, especially the low levels anyway.
Yeah.
So I think his range is generally pretty weak. And then second off, a lot of these suited low hands, they make really good raises as bluffs because when you get a fold, generally they were actually ahead of you. And when you get a call, you at least can flop some flush draws. So this would definitely be a hand I would consider to put into a bluff raise pre-flop range.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then usually in this spot, I would raise to 60. I don't know if you have any thoughts about sizing.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, let me ask you this. What's your thoughts on what kind of hands are you going to choose to bluff the turn with?
On the turn, if I were to bluff the turn, then I suppose then this would be an okay candidate. If I had, I'm trying to think of something that I would bluff the turn with that I wouldn't have bet the flop with. And, I guess, diamonds seem like an obvious choice. But I'm not sure if there's anything I'm missing there.
I think this hand is an okay choice. I think it's also very reasonable to not bluff with it. I think the clear choices are hands like 6-4, hands like diamonds. Those are definitely good choices. But one thing that's really interesting to me about this spot is when it goes limp check, there's a lot less aces in both players' ranges. So it does make sense to be a little more conservative on the king turn. Like the king is definitely a good card for his range. So I don't mind being a little more selective with your bluffs, but I'm just seeing which ones you would pick out to try and bluff with.
Yeah, if I had something like 6-4, I would generally speaking probably just bet on the flop. Do you think that's not necessarily a good thing because of the ace there?
Sorry, the flop, was the flop not bet? The flop was bet in this hand, correct? Yeah, I think the flop was bet.
Oh my god, already.
It's all good, it's all good.
I'm going to try my hardest not to make a huge fool of myself in this video when talking to you. Already, guys, we're done.
No problem at all. I mean, I think, for what it's worth, I think that checking and betting the flop are close, raising and checking pre are close. A lot of times, these decisions are all going to be pretty close, but I think the most important thing is figuring out the system you're going to use for deciphering when to do each thing. Because you want to have some hands that check back and bluff turn. You want to have some hands that bet flop and then give up. You want to have some hands that go 3. You want to do all of these things, and I'm just trying to get a feel for which hands you're selecting to do those things with, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we can carry on. It's good. And I like this river value bet, too.
Yeah, awesome. Right.
Although I think I'd go a little bit bigger, but because he's mainly going to have a 5 or a 3. He's not going to have many kings. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. I was thinking to myself, well, his range is pretty weak here, but he probably is going to call a small bet if he has a 5 or a 3. And then I was afraid of betting too much because then I didn't want him to fold the 3. But I'm not sure. Maybe 30 would have been perhaps better.
I think generally in these spots you should just pick a pretty normal size. And if you're afraid they're always going to fold, then just bluff a lot. Is what I would do.
That's fair. All right, cool. Let's go on.
All right, nice, interesting hand out of the gate. That's good.
Yeah, with a 7-2, right?
Yeah.
So I, generally speaking, limp pretty wide here, blind versus blind.
Okay, seems good. I like this play on the flop, too.
And wrecked.
All right. Yeah, looks like a fold. I think he had you.
I think so, probably.
And the thing is, that flop bet is just going to be so successful. You're going to get a ton of folds, and, with equity, it seems good.
Yeah. I actually do. I'm not sure if perhaps I'm betting too much out of position, blind versus blind. It could be that I am.
Okay. I think it's fine.
Okay.
As long as, you are going to have some, and this seems like a well-played hand too, you are going to have some hands that, want to trap pre-flop. So as long as you're making sure you mix in some traps, I think and some checks on the flop that are a bit stronger, I think you're fine.
Right.
Yeah, and then 5 seems like a very standard jam there. All right, we got some button limping going on.
I know they limp a lot at these stakes. I mean, obviously people are starting to limp a lot at all stakes. Okay, so the 7-6, I wasn't sure about this. Probably could have put a complete in there. I think I regretted it after I folded.
Okay, so the way that I would look at this spot is I would say like, okay, I'm not totally sure what's going on with the button's limp range, and is that a bronze star? I'm not entirely.
Yeah, I mean it's 25-cent spins.
Right. Okay. So
there's a lot of.
You know what? Even though it is a 25-cent spin, you can kind of say something here from just the fact that we have a bronze star, and I think that this guy's already like the third level from the lowest. I don't even know what the levels are, but it does actually say a little something, right? Like this guy is probably a little bit more of a regular than the player with the bronze star, and I guess I wouldn't really infer too much from that. But what I would say is that limp is probably not going to be a very calibrated range. And so when I look at a hand like 7-6, right, you're getting a direct 5-1. You're getting direct 5-1 odds to call pre-flop, which means you only need to have about like 17% equity to call, and you're definitely going to get that with 7-6. The only thing that can really crush you is how often does the big blind raise,
right? And
especially on a stack here that's more like 25 blinds. I don't think you're going to get raised more than 10-15% of the time. And, because of that, the equity you then need to call goes up to about 22%. But I think you're just simply going to get that with a hand like 7-6 offsuit.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So, yeah.
I think as you get shorter, though, it can become more reasonable because, like, once you hit a stack size where he's just going to jam an ace, then it gets way, way, way worse to call with those hands. Because you're gonna face raise too much, but particularly at this depth, I think it makes a lot of sense to complete those.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
8-6 seems reasonable. I'm not. It's like definitely one of those cutoff hands either way pre-flop. So I don't really mind raise or fold. In tighter lineups, I'd probably recommend a fold.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think that it's fine here.
Yeah. When I've been playing. These lower, micro stakes spins, I've tended to lean towards, I guess, aggression because there are a lot of people that don't play enough hands.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's pause here, actually. So this is interesting, but before we talk about the river, I guess I want to talk a little bit about the turn. I think the flop is fine, checking also okay, but betting is pretty good because you can barrel turns like a 3 or a 4 or a 7. So, or even a 9, really, I guess. So you actually, I like this hand as a flop bet. I think the turn is really interesting, and there's kind of like two camps that how they like to play this turn spot, even at higher stakes play. There is a camp of people that thinks that they should generally be betting these spots because they're always going to have all of their strong hands. So your range is very protected with all of your good holdings. And then there are people that like to check and then play it more for like river bets, try and go bet, check, bet. The problem with that line is that if you get check raised, those hands have a really tough time. And of course, again, at hypers, excuse me, at hypers it's less of an issue, I guess. But the problem is if you do go bet, check, bet, and you get raised, you have a difficult situation. So I think on the turn, both bet and check are extremely reasonable plays, and I think that both of those have a lot of merit. Checking, of course, also being fine. But I think once we decide the check back turn, we have a very clear call here on the river.
Okay, so you think it should have been a clear call?
Yeah, because think about all of the hands you can have here. So for starters, I think a lot of players on these stacks are going to raise a jack on the flop. Maybe not all of them, and maybe some players won't. But a lot of jacks are going to get raised on the flop. And then there's also a wide array of draws here that can bluff: ace 3, ace 4, 4-3, 6-4, 6-3, diamonds. Definitely reasonable on the flop to be floating a hand like king queen. Queen 9 suited, all this kind of stuff. So if you have like a backdoor draw. Oh, sorry, Queen 9, of course, being the nuts now. But I guess I'm just saying there's a lot of these overcard type hands that might want to be floating.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, then.
You're also getting 3-1, which is a pretty good price.
Okay.
It's also, by the way, one more note about that hand. it's going to be hard for you to have a 10 because if you have a 10, a straight draw on the turn, you're generally going to be betting that. So you're not going to have queen 10, 10, 9, a lot of those hands.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Would you have then bluffed pre-flop with the 4-2 suited here?
You're catching on. That's exactly what I would have done for sure.
Perfect.
I think it's an even better bluff than 7-2 because you have a lot of fold equity and it actually has some pretty good playability post-flop.
You can actually make some hands with 4-2.
Some very sneaky hands.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Post-flop looks good. I like checking it down here.
Yeah, I think he just checks after tanking here. I remember when I was playing this, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm sitting here and this guy's tanking.
Yeah, that's not really what you're looking for.
Playing these hypers, it's so tilting. Not that I'd ever tank, but...
Yeah, it's interesting he decided to check a king there. And they actually give us a little insight into the way that prior hand went. I think it's a little more likely he was bluffing because when he checks top pair here and then, he's really showing a propensity to throw some traps in there, right?
Right.
And I think in poker, when you see those showdowns, you really want to try and take them and not go too overboard, but just remember those little subtle details because that will help you make better decisions against them in future hands.
All right, makes sense.
And then clear jam here, 7-5.
Yeah, so we're at that beautiful 10 BB stack.
And you're also at that beautiful one player is not here.
Yes, I was actually trying to figure out what I was going to do in that hand with the 10-7 if this guy had come back. I'm actually not sure what my best play is with 10-7, 12 big blinds on the button. I think if the big blind isn't AFK, I think I like a fold. Mm-hmm. But I think with him not being there, min raise fold to jam looks great. All right, perfect.
I also think, just one more note there, I think for the small blind, he should be jamming much more aggressively in that spot because your open range should be a lot wider. And this actually kind of brings me to another thing I want to talk about really fast before we keep going. Spin Goes are interesting because unlike most Sin Goes or conventional tournaments, chip value to money is actually just 1-to-1, which is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to play them initially is because I don't have to worry too much about, I don't have to worry at all about ICM, and I just hate ICM and Sin Goes. It's really not my cup of tea.
Yeah, the thing about ICM is it's one of those things that can really suck sometimes, but you also need to know how to use it to your advantage, right? Sometimes you're the shorter stack, and sometimes you're the big stack, and when you're the big stack, you definitely have to really grind on those people.
Right.
I've actually gotten a little taste of the small stake stuff recently with my challenge.
Right.
And there's some people that, definitely do not care about the ICM value when you're playing small stake or micro stakes. So I can understand your thinking there.
Right, pretty sure I just go all in here.
Yep, jam looks good.
So here with this hand, I wasn't exactly sure it was best here. I figured that I had a few choices with the King Jack. I mean, it seems like an okay hand to limp. It seems like a good hand to raise.
So I guess let me ask you this question. What's your overall strategy going to be out of the small blind here? Describe to me all of the things you're going to be doing.
The biggest strategy, the main thing is that I do intend to limp a very wide range. Just because I think that most people, especially at these stakes, aren't going to be attacking my limps very much. And I should be able to see quite a few flops. So that's the main thing. Yeah, so I guess that's the main strategy. I don't know if you're asking whether I'm planning on what kind of value I'm planning on having in my limping range.
So I guess there's 3 options here pre-flop other than fold. You can limp, you can raise small, or you could jam, right?
Right.
And I think that our strategy is going to want to take advantage of all of those things because they all have some value. I might counter by saying, limping, of course, is going to be good, but I also might say that at these stakes, players are probably going to play far too tight against a raise.
Right.
So I guess what I would say is if I'm either going to limp or jam, I don't mind limping with King Jack, if I'm going to have a raise range, I kind of like having it as a raise, so I'm able to raise and then call a jam.
Yep.
But yeah, I think open jamming is definitely not the play here with a hand that can play as well post flop as King Jack.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. All right. My plan here on the flop, I think, was to check call.
Seems good. I don't think betting does very much for you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You're also extremely likely to be... If he checks back, I think you're basically always good because ace-high hands are going to be jamming pre. So,
yeah, definitely. I agree.
So, yeah, the river is actually very close to a value bet.
I was wondering, I did consider betting. I decided that I was just going to win it with the king high anyway, and he was...
I think checking is probably the better play. But, like, if you're playing against people that, you know, are stationy and... In that spot, you can't really have an ace, you can't really have a straight. Those are going to bet the turn. So I would certainly be looking for some spots to go for some thin value.
Right. So I think when I was playing this, I was trying to figure out, well, should I bluff on the turn? I don't know. I didn't really... I guess I didn't because I didn't... With the flush draw out there, I just thought I was getting called so often, and then I didn't really want to fire a third barrel, so I just said fuck it. But
I mean, this is okay, and it kind of goes back to the 7-2 hand. But what I would say is I do feel you are putting too many hands and just try and take a stab at the flop and then give up.
Right.
Which I think like a pretty common mistake people have is they don't fire that third barrel. Like sometimes you got to fire it. So, you know, in this spot, you could decide to do that with hearts. You could decide to do that with a slightly better gut shot, like 6-7 or 6-5 or 7-5. But, you know, you also do need to make sure you have those hands that go 3. What's interesting about this spot is that both players are not going to have an ace very much. So the turn queen is definitely not a good turn. There should be some queen eye floats that are going to call here on the flop. But at the same time, you have to pick some bluffs. So I wouldn't mind seeing either way with this one.
Okay. I think I bluffed on the river.
I like it. You can have some 8s here. And it would be reasonable to check an 8 back on the turn.
We got wrecked.
You got wrecked. If you'd fired 3, though, you would have gotten it.
I know, but I don't think should I be firing 3 when the 8 comes on the river?
Why? You can have an 8.
Could I? Would I bet 2? Should I be betting 2 with an 8 there?
I don't think it's unreasonable to bet 2 with an 8. Like, he doesn't really have an ace.
Right.
So, and if you have a good 8, yeah, I think a good 8 is going 3.
Despite the fact that the queen is a bad card and he should have some queen high floats.
Yeah, but he's going to have less queens than kings. And I think he's generally going to be he's going to more likely have a draw or a 4. And he'll have a few 8s, but even then you will have some hands like 2 pair. You could have a hand like an 8. If you had a hand like an ace, like let's say you decided to check back one of your weakest aces pre-flop, which would be an okay decision. You're going to want to go 3. Or let's say you bet a queen on the flop and you turn a queen. You're going to want to barrel the turn, right? So, yeah, I don't think it would be unreasonable at all. And you're going to always have some hands like 2 pairs or maybe like, you know, I'm going to check back aces pre-flop, right? Because you're so short. So I guess I would just say that don't be afraid to put 3 barrels in with some hands because that way when they do have weak holdings, which frankly they mainly do in these blind versus blind situations, you can take down the pot.
Okay, that makes sense.
So pre-flop here, I like the limp, but again, it's like a closer spot now because the big blind's going to jam more hands.
Right. Yes, that does make sense. I wasn't actually sure what I should be doing here on the flop. I decided to donk bet, but I don't know if that was a good decision.
Are you planning on having some bluffs here?
Okay, here's the thing about that statement.
Okay.
I don't actually know how much I'm balancing at these stakes because
Right.
I don't necessarily think that it's a reason to. However, if I am planning on grinding up the stakes, obviously I will need to start having some sort of balanced ranges as we move up and start playing a bunch of regs.
Well, let me ask you this. If you bet here, do you think you get folds from both of them a decent amount?
I think that they're never folding anything that hits on the board. That hits the board, rather, and I think that they're calling very often with draws. So, but on the other hand, I think that, say if they have a 10 or a 7, I don't necessarily think they're betting. which is why I wanted to donk bet.
I guess what I would say here is I think if they have a pair, you're unlikely to get a fold. Obviously not Jack or a 10. I think if the big blind has a hand like a 7, you're actually putting him in a very tough spot. Because let's say he has 7-5 in the small blind bets, what does he do?
Right.
I actually think I think he has a tough spot there. So I'm not really a big fan of having strategies that don't like work in some bluffs. And I'm okay with the lead. I think I would probably just check all of my hands on the flop, given that we don't really know what the button's limp range looks like, and we're out of position in a three-way pot. And generally, the more people that there are in the pot, the more likely I am to check most or all of my hands. But if I was going to have a bet range on the flop, I would want to be able to work in a few bluffs. Like, let's say I had a hand that was like 9-6 of diamonds or 9-6 of clubs, or maybe if I had a hand like King 8 of hearts or something.
Yep.
So I'm okay with the lead as long as we're also going to bluff. And I know we don't want to make adjustments too much to what people are doing, or rather, we don't have to be too balanced because the people we're playing are playing a 25-cent spin and go. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a good strategy. We should just make some small adjustments within our strategy. And I think a big mistake people have when they're playing these micro limits, and I know now because I've played hours of this lately, but I think a big mistake that players have these micro limits are they say things too much like, oh, you can't do this thing because it's this buy-in. And the answer is you absolutely can and should. Yeah. You should be bluffing people at micro stakes. You should be going for value. You should be using the same sizes. And yeah, maybe obviously if you knew exactly what every person was doing, you could exploit them by making extreme adjustments. And that's totally fine. But at the same time, you want to use a really good strategy against them that works no matter what they do by having a smart entire strategy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously when you're moving up the stakes, you're not going to have to learn that kind of stuff from scratch.
Definitely true as well.
Makes sense. This is a grind, this one.
Yeah, they can be... I've actually... You know what? I actually played some spin and goes. I probably played like 4 or 5K hands lifetime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when they came out, I was like, oh, I'll give it a grind. Why not?
Okay, all right. Yeah. And did you enjoy them, or did they tilt you?
They, well, it's funny. I won a lot in terms of chips, but in money, I broke even or lost slightly because the way that they work, it just the interval payout scale is just... You have to hope you get lucky, right?
Yeah. It's totally standard to be positive chip EV and be down money, unfortunately. Yeah.
All right, this isn't bad.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. I was pretty happy to see these two.
Yeah.
All right. Heads up.
His decision pre-flop is actually close, I think.
With the ace-2? Okay.
I mean, like, how many blinds was it? 12?
It was 12, yeah.
12 with the big blind left? I don't know. I think it's at least interesting. All right, so what are your thoughts here on the turn? All right, we're playing some heads up.
No, we're playing. So my thoughts on the turn is that seems like a pretty nice spot to value bet.
Okay. What are you planning on check calling?
On the turn, I would probably check call anything with a 6.
Okay.
I would check call... I guess hands with showdown value that have a 7.
Okay, so what are you planning on calling turn and calling river with?
What I'm planning on calling turn and calling river with? Stronger 8s.
But you're betting all your 8s.
Doesn't make any sense. Oh my god! I don't know. That's a good question. You got me. Stumped me.
So the answer is this hand.
Okay.
So you should probably be check calling this on the turn to call river.
So then, with the stronger 8s, I would be betting twice.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
You don't want to fall into the trap of just betting too many value hands. You want to make sure you protect your checks a little bit too.
Makes sense. Yeah, I agree. This is I think the kind of hand where I would be checking if it were against a reg, but okay. I just jam it in against a recreational player. I'm not sure if that's an incorrect adjustment.
Okay, I think pre-flop, Jam is definitely going to make money. The question is, does it make more than check, right? You have to compare them like that. And the answer is probably that it's close. One of the things that makes this a nice check pre-flop is that it balances out your ability to have some hands on some like ace-high type boards that otherwise you're going to be completely fucked if you don't have them. So I like that with check. But, really, jamming is also good. The question is, what do you value more? Do you value more having the ability to cover some flops, or do you value more just that pre-flop all-in equity? And I guess I wouldn't say that this was wrong. I would just say that both decisions can make money when you have, 12 blinds and ace-3 suited.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's it.
Yeah, look good.
We won.
We did. What a surprise. I had no idea.
I know. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed going over the Spin and Go with Doug, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you did, please do click that thumbs up, and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you'd ever like to watch me play poker live, you can go to twitch.tv/courtiebee. I will leave a link down below, and you can also find me on Twitter @courtiebee there. Leave a link down below for that too. Thanks again. Have a great day or night, whatever it is for you. Talk to you soon.